Let's begin with stillness. Allow yourself to settle into a quiet space of learning. There's no need to focus sharply, no pressure to retain every detail. You are simply here to listen, softly, slowly, and gently absorb. In this first section, we'll take a calm, wide-lens look at the female reproductive system. Not to analyze it in depth, not yet, but to become familiar with its general purpose, its place in the body, and the way it contributes to human physiology. Think of this moment as standing at the edge of a quiet field. Before we begin walking through the pathways and details, we're simply noticing the landscape as a whole, observing the shapes, the contours, the general structure. The female reproductive system is one of the body's most beautifully regulated systems. It serves several vital functions, all interconnected, all governed by a delicate interplay of anatomy and hormones. At its core, this system supports the continuation of life through reproduction. But beyond reproduction, it also plays a significant role in regulating hormones, maintaining internal balance, and responding to subtle signals from other systems in the body. It is both deeply internal and yet closely linked to the outside world, responding to environmental cues, emotional states, and physiological cycles. Let's begin by placing the reproductive system within the larger framework of human anatomy. Like other organ systems such as the digestive, cardiovascular, or respiratory systems, the reproductive system has its own distinct set of organs, tissues, and physiological responsibilities. Unlike many other systems, though, the reproductive system differs between biological sexes. In this script, we'll be focusing on the female reproductive system, its structure, its processes, and its coordination with other systems like the endocrine, nervous, and circulatory systems. At the anatomical level, the female reproductive system is divided into two main regions, the external reproductive structures and the internal reproductive organs. Each region contains unique components, and each plays a different but coordinated role in reproduction and hormonal function. The external structures are visible from the outside. They include the vulva, which encompasses features like the labia, clitoris, and vestibular glands. These structures contribute to protection, sensory input, and access to the inner reproductive tract. We'll explore them more gently in the next section. The internal reproductive organs located within the pelvis include the vagina, the cervix, the uterus, the fallopian tubes, and the ovaries. Each has a specific structure and a specific purpose. The vagina acts as a passageway for menstrual flow, for childbirth, and for sexual function. The cervix serves as the gateway between the vagina and the uterus. The uterus is a muscular organ capable of expanding to support pregnancy. The fallopian tubes act as transport channels for the ovum or egg during ovulation. And the ovaries are where those eggs are stored and released, and where reproductive hormones are produced. Even just hearing these names may feel like a lot. That sip's okay. There's no need to memorize anything right now. We will return to each part, one by one, with gentleness and care. Now let's gently shift focus from structure to function. What exactly does this system do? Its primary function is to facilitate reproduction. That includes several stages: the production of gametes, or sex cells, the release of an egg, the possible fertilization of that egg by sperm, and the support of a growing fetus if pregnancy occurs. But reproduction is only part of the picture. The female reproductive system is also a hormonal system, one that regulates the production of key hormones like estrogen and progesterone. These hormones do not act in isolation. They influence not just reproductive organs, but also the breasts, the brain, the bones, the skin, and the mood. In fact, the reproductive system is closely tied to the endocrine system, a network of glands and hormones that send messages throughout the body. Together, they create a menstrual cycle, a rhythmic, monthly process involving hormonal fluctuations, tissue changes, and cellular responses. This cycle prepares the body for the possibility of pregnancy, and when pregnancy doesn't occur, It resets itself and begins again. The cycle is typically about 28 days, though it can vary, and each part of the cycle involves a coordinated change in hormone levels, tissue responses, and organ activity. We will walk through this cycle slowly in later sections, not all at once. For now, it is enough to know that the system follows a predictable rhythm guided by internal cues. The female reproductive system also has important connections to the nervous system, which sends and receives sensory information, and to the circulatory system, which delivers hormones, oxygen, and nutrients to reproductive tissues. During pregnancy, for example, the blood supply to the uterus increases significantly to nourish the growing fetus. And during puberty, neural signals from the brain activate the release of reproductive hormones, marking the start of reproductive maturity. In this way, the female reproductive system doesn't work alone. It collaborates, silently, continuously, with the rest of the body. Everything is interconnected. Nothing happens in isolation. Throughout this script, we will return to these ideas many times. We will revisit each organ, each hormone, and each function with fresh clarity. And as we do, things that may seem complex at first will become more familiar. You do not need to grasp it all at once. You are not being tested. You are simply being guided. As we continue, you may find certain terms repeating. This is intentional. Gentle repetition helps build recognition, especially when learning passively. It's such perfectly okay to drift in and out of focus. Your brain continues to process information, even when you're relaxed, even when you're nearly asleep. So, as we close this introductory section, let's quietly review what we've touched on. We've identified the female reproductive system as a vital part of human anatomy, responsible for reproduction, for hormonal regulation, and for cyclical bodily changes. We've named its external structures, such as the vulva, and its internal organs like the uterus, fallopian tubes, and ovaries. We've gently noted the roles of hormones like estrogen and progesterone, and introduced the menstrual cycle as a rhythmic, repeating process. And we've briefly acknowledged the close relationship between this system and the endocrine, nervous, and circulatory systems. There is much more to come, but for now we rest in a place of familiarity. You've begun the journey, and that is enough. When you're ready, we'll move into the next section and take a closer look at the external reproductive structures. But for now, you can simply let the words settle and breathe. You are learning, quietly, gently, exactly as you should be. Let us continue, calmly and without hurry. In the previous section, we introduced the female reproductive system as a whole, its functions, its internal rhythm, and its role within the body's larger physiology. Now we begin to look more closely, not to analyze, but to gently observe, to listen, to notice, and to slowly become familiar with the external structures of the female reproductive anatomy. These external structures are collectively known as the vulva. The term vulva refers to the outward visible part of the female genitalia. It includes several different components, each with its own structure and purpose. These structures are not isolated. They work together to provide protection, facilitate sensation, and support the functions of the deeper internal organs. As we walk through each one, take your time. There is no need to recall exact positions or functions. Just let the information wash over you. Like being softly guided through a landscape, noticing the shape of things, the edges, the space they create. We still begin with the labia. There are two sets, the labia majora and the labia minora. The labia majora, or greater lips, are the outermost folds of skin. They extend from the mons pubis downward, framing the entrance to the vaginal area. They are usually covered with pubic hair after puberty and contain sweat glands, sebaceous glands, and connective tissue. Their primary role is to protect the more delicate structures inside, much like eyelids protect the eyes. Beneath the labia majora lie the labia minora, or lesser lips. These are thinner, more delicate folds of skin, often hairless and highly variable in appearance from person to person. They surround the vestibule, the space that includes the openings of the urethra and vagina. The labia minora are rich in blood vessels and nerve endings, contributing to both protection and sensation. They also help guide secretions that maintain moisture and cleanliness in the vestibular area. Now, resting gently at the upper junction of the labia minora, we find the clitoris. This small but highly sensitive organ plays a central role in sexual sensation. What is visible on the surface, the glands of the clitoris, is just a small part of a much larger structure that extends beneath the skin. The clitoris is rich in nerve endings, and its only known function is to provide pleasure. Though small in size, it contains more nerve endings than any other part of the human body. It is also composed of erectile tissue, similar to structures in the male reproductive system. During sexual arousal, the clitoris becomes engorged with blood and more sensitive to touch. Its location just above the urethral opening makes it easy to miss, but it is anatomically and functionally significant. Now we move downward to the vestibule. This is the central space enclosed by the labia minora. Within the vestibule are two important openings: the urethral opening, where urine exits the body, and the vaginal opening, or introitus. The vestibule also contains the openings of the greater vestibular glands, also known as Bartholin's glands. These glands produce small amounts of lubricating fluid, especially during arousal, helping to moisten the area and reduce friction. Although often unnoticed, the vestibule is a vital space. It provides access to the inner reproductive organs and helps maintain comfort, cleanliness, and protection from irritation. Let us now return to the outer edge to complete the picture of the external region. Behind the vestibule, between the vaginal opening and the anus, lies the perineum. The perineum is a fibromuscular region, a blend of muscle, connective tissue, and skin. It forms part of the pelvic floor, a complex group of muscles that support the organs within the pelvis, including the uterus, bladder, and rectum. Although small, the perineum plays an important role in stability and support. During childbirth, this area stretches significantly, and sometimes tears or is surgically incised, a procedure known as episiotomy, to assist delivery. After delivery, it often heals slowly and gradually, aided by blood flow and tissue regeneration. In daily life, the perineum contributes to pelvic floor strength and helps maintain continence or control over urination and defecation. It also responds to hormonal and neurological signals, adapting to changes in posture, pressure, and physical activity. Now that we've moved through the individual components of the vulva and perineum, let's pause for a moment and gently revisit them in sequence. The labia majora, the outer folds, protect the inner structures. The labia minora, more delicate and sensitive, enclose the vestibule. The clitoris, small but complex, is rich in nerve endings and contributes to sensation. The vestibule, a central space, contains the urethral and vaginal openings, and the perineum lying just behind supports the pelvic floor and connects the reproductive system with surrounding structures. Each of these parts serves a purpose. Each one is built to support, to protect, or to provide sensation. They are not static. They respond to touch, temperature, hormonal shifts, and changes in mood or physical state. Taken together, these external structures form a soft gateway to the inner reproductive organs. And while we will spend more time on internal anatomy in the next sections, it is important to appreciate that the vulva and perineum are not just outer coverings. They are active participants in sexual health, reproductive function, and emotional experience. This section, like all others, is not meant to overwhelm. If the terms are new to you, that is perfectly fine. You are not expected to memorize, only to listen. The names and functions will settle into your awareness over time. Each time you revisit these ideas, they'll feel a little more familiar, a little more comfortable. As we prepare to move inward toward the vagina and cervix, let this section serve as a gentle foundation. You now have a soft outline of the structures that protect, support, and open the way to the deeper reproductive organs. There is no need to hold on tightly to each word. It is enough to know the shape of things, to feel the calm rhythm of the learning process, and to remember that all systems of the body are connected, supported, and gently working together. Take a breath. Let the muscles of your body relax, and know that you are learning in the way your brain was designed. Quietly, gradually, without pressure, let it move inward now, gently and without hurry, leaving the outer structures behind as we begin to explore the internal components of the female reproductive system. We begin with the vagina, a passageway that is both functional and adaptive, designed to serve multiple roles within the body. And from there we'll move gently upward to the cervix, the lower portion of the uterus, and a structure that shifts and responds throughout the menstrual cycle. This section will not ask you to remember every detail. It simply invites you to observe, to notice, and to gradually understand how these two organs support and protect the body in quiet, consistent ways. Let's start with the vaginal canal. The vagina is a muscular, tubular organ. It extends from the external vaginal opening, located in the vestibule, to the cervix, which marks the entrance to the uterus. It is approximately 7 to 10 centimeters long in a relaxed state, but it is capable of lengthening and widening in response to hormonal and physical signals. This adaptability allows it to accommodate penetration, childbirth, and the passage of menstrual fluid. The walls of the vagina are composed of 3 layers: an inner mucosal layer, which maintains moisture and protection, a middle muscular layer made of smooth muscle that allows for stretch and contraction, and an outer connective tissue layer, which provides structure and support. The mucosal lining of the vagina is not like skin. Instead, it is made of stratified squamous epithelium, a type of tissue designed to withstand friction and protect against minor trauma. This lining is kept moist by secretions from the cervix and from specialized glands in the surrounding tissues. Importantly, the vagina maintains a slightly acidic pH, typically ranging between 3.8 and 4.5. This acidity is maintained by lactobacilli, a type of beneficial bacteria that helps prevent infections by limiting the growth of harmful microorganisms. The vaginal environment, therefore, is not passive. It is self-regulating, balancing pH, moisture, and microbial populations to support reproductive health. During sexual activity, the vaginal canal becomes more lubricated and elastic, responding to stimulation and increased blood flow. During childbirth, it expands dramatically to allow the passage of the newborn. And during menstruation, it provides a pathway for the shedding of the uterine lining. Across each of these roles, the vagina demonstrates both resilience and responsiveness. It does not remain the same throughout the month, but changes in subtle ways, shifting in tone, texture, and moisture, depending on hormonal cues from the body. Now let us move slowly upward, toward the cervix. The cervix is the lower narrow portion of the uterus that extends into the upper end of the vaginal canal. It serves as a gatekeeper, regulating what enters the uterus and what exits. The cervix is typically about 2.5 to 3 centimeters in length, and its position and texture can vary depending on the phase of the menstrual cycle. It is composed of dense connective tissue, along with smooth muscle and glandular cells that produce cervical mucus. During most of the cycle, the cervical opening, called the external ours, remains small and firm. It protects the uterus from external pathogens while still allowing for the slow passage of menstrual fluid and sperm. As ovulation approaches, the cervix becomes softer, higher, and more open. It also produces a type of mucus that becomes thinner, clearer, and more alkaline, creating a more favorable environment for sperm. This shift is subtle but essential. It reflects how the cervix acts as both a physical and functional bridge between the internal and external reproductive environments. After ovulation during the luteal phase, the cervix gradually returns to a firmer, lower position. The mucus thickens once again, creating a gentle barrier that helps prevent bacteria from entering the uterus. These changes are controlled by fluctuating levels of estrogen and progesterone, which influence both tissue structure and secretory activity. During pregnancy, the cervix remains firm and closed, helping to retain the developing fetus within the uterus. As labor approaches, a process called cervical ripening occurs. The cervix begins to soften, thin, and dilate to allow for childbirth. This transformation is gradual and guided by hormonal signals like prostaglandins and oxytocin. The cervix, while often overlooked, plays a vital role in reproductive timing, protection, and transition. It is neither fully inside nor fully outside. It stands between, adapting its structure to support the needs of the body over time. Let's take a moment now to softly revisit what we've explored. We began with the vagina, a muscular canal that supports multiple functions, including protection, childbirth, and sexual interaction. Its lining maintains a healthy microbial balance and adapts in response to physical and hormonal cues. We then moved upward to the cervix, which connects the vagina to the uterus. This small but dynamic structure shifts in position, softness, and function across the menstrual cycle, pregnancy, and childbirth. Together, the vagina and cervix form the entrance and passage to the deeper internal reproductive structures, supporting both protection and reproduction in quiet, regulated ways. These organs are not passive. They listen. They adapt. They respond. You may notice that some of these terms feel clearer now than they did before. That is how gentle learning works. With repetition, with softness, with time, you are building understanding slowly and steadily. As we move forward in the next section, we'll continue our inward journey, this time focusing on the uterus, its layers, and its central role in reproductive physiology. But for now, let your mind rest in what you absorbed here. You learned about structure and function, about transition and regulation, and about how the body, even in its smallest parts, is always adjusting in thoughtful, quiet ways. Let it settle. No pressure. No urgency. Only calm, continuous understanding. You are doing just fine. Let's continue our slow and quiet journey through the female reproductive system. Having gently explored the vagina and cervix, we now arrive at the center, the uterus. This small muscular organ holds deep significance, physically, hormonally, and emotionally. It is often called the womb, and it plays a central role in the possibility of reproduction. But even beyond that role, it is a responsive, cyclical organ, changing in shape, texture, and activity across the menstrual cycle, adapting to the body's needs with silent precision. In this section, we will take our time. We'll move slowly through the structure of the uterus, its layers, and its function, not as a fixed object, but as a dynamic part of the reproductive landscape. As always, there is no need to memorize. You are simply here to listen and absorb, softly, gently. Let us begin with a broad description. The uterus is a hollow, pear-shaped organ located in the pelvis, between the bladder and the rectum. In an adult, it typically measures about 7 to 8 centimeters in length, 4 to 5 centimeters wide at its broadest point, and about 2 to 3 centimeters thick. Though small, it is remarkably flexible, capable of expanding during pregnancy to many times its original size. The uterus is divided into several anatomical regions. The fundus is the top, rounded portion. Below that is the body, which makes up the majority of the organ. And the isthmus is the narrow portion that connects to the cervix, which we discussed in the last section. At each upper corner, the uterus connects to the fallopian tubes, where the egg may arrive following ovulation. Now, let's shift our focus to the walls of the uterus. There are 3 distinct layers, each with its own structure and role. From the outer surface inward, they are the perimetrium, the myometrium, the endometrium. We'll explore each of these layers gently, one at a time. First, the perimetrium. This is the outermost layer of the uterus. It is a thin, smooth layer of serous tissue continuous with the lining of the abdominal cavity. The perimetrium acts as a protective covering, reducing friction between the uterus and surrounding organs. It doesn't play a direct role in menstruation or pregnancy, but it is essential for structural integrity. Think of it as the soft outer wrapping that allows the uterus to move slightly as the bladder or bowel fills and empties. Beneath the perimetrium lies the myometrium, the middle layer and the thickest of the three. The myometrium is composed of smooth muscle fibers arranged in 3 layers that run in different directions: longitudinal, circular, and oblique. This arrangement allows the uterus to contract efficiently from multiple angles. The myometrium has 2 main functions. During the menstrual cycle, it contracts gently, helping to shed the inner lining. And during labor, it contracts forcefully, assisting in the delivery of the baby. These contractions are regulated by hormonal signals, especially from oxytocin, which stimulates powerful muscular movements during childbirth. Even outside of labor, the uterus contracts in subtle ways. During ovulation, mild uterine contractions help guide sperm toward the fallopian tubes. And during menstruation, contractions help release the endometrial lining. These movements are often unnoticed, but they reflect the constant, quiet work of the myometrium. Now we move inward to the most sensitive and dynamic layer of all, the endometrium. The endometrium is the innermost lining of the uterus, and it is the site of implantation if fertilization occurs. This layer is hormonally responsive, meaning it undergoes regular changes throughout the menstrual cycle. It thickens, becomes enriched with blood vessels, and then, if no implantation occurs, it is shed during menstruation. The endometrium is composed of 2 sublayers: the functional layer, which is shed during menstruation, and the basal layer, which remains and regenerates the functional layer after each cycle. During the proliferative phase of the menstrual cycle, rising estrogen levels stimulate the growth of the endometrial lining. The tissue becomes thicker and more vascular, preparing the uterus for a possible pregnancy. Following ovulation in the secretory phase, the hormone progesterone, released from the corpus luteum, helps maintain the endometrium. Glands within the lining begin to secrete nutrients that would support an early embryo. If fertilization does not occur, hormone levels drop. This causes the blood vessels in the endometrium to constrict, and the functional layer breaks down and is released through the vagina, marking the start of menstruation. Then, the cycle begins again. The basal layer remains in place and initiates the regeneration of a new functional layer. This process repeats on average every 28 days. Though the timing may vary from person to person, the pattern remains a coordinated interplay of growth, maintenance, shedding, and renewal. The uterus is not a static space. It is alive with change, guided by hormones, prepared for possibility. Let's pause here and softly summarize what we've just explored. The uterus is a central organ of the female reproductive system. It is divided into 3 layers. The perimetrium, the outermost layer, protects and anchors the uterus in the pelvic cavity. The myometrium, the muscular middle layer, contracts during menstruation and labor. The endometrium, the inner lining, thickens and sheds in response to hormonal changes, preparing for potential implantation. Each layer is distinct, yet each works in harmony with the others, forming a system that is both supportive and responsive. Throughout the reproductive years, the uterus undergoes monthly changes, subtle preparations for a pregnancy that may or may not occur. It is not wasteful. It is rhythmic, purposeful, and cyclical. Even when not carrying a pregnancy, the uterus plays an essential role in hormonal balance and reproductive signaling. It responds not only to estrogen and progesterone, but to signals from the brain, from the ovaries, and from the entire endocrine system. During pregnancy, the uterus undergoes its most profound transformation. The myometrium stretches, expanding many times its normal size. The endometrium transforms into the decidua, supporting the implantation of the embryo and the development of the placenta. We will explore these changes more deeply in later sections. For now, it is enough to understand the uterus as a place of potential, not always active, but always prepared. Not always in motion, but always in cycle. If any of this feels complex, let it pass over you gently. There is no need to grasp every detail. As you continue listening, the terms and functions will become more familiar. Clarity grows quietly, over time. As we close this section, take a moment to appreciate the elegant design of this organ. Small in size, yet capable of profound change. Layered in structure, yet unified in purpose. The uterus is a space of preparation, of rhythm, and of adaptation. And in the next section, we will follow the path further into the fallopian tubes. There, we will trace the quiet journey of the egg and explore how these slender structures support the possibility of fertilization. But for now, let the body rest. Let the learning settle. You are doing enough. Exactly as you are. Let's continue gently now, moving outward from the uterus to the slender, soft passageways known as the fallopian tubes, also called uterine tubes or oviducts. These delicate structures serve as the connecting corridors between the ovaries and the uterus. Though small and often overlooked, the fallopian tubes are vital to the reproductive process. They are not just physical channels, but active participants capable of motion, responsiveness, and support. Each fallopian tube stretches from the superior corners of the uterus and gently arches outward toward the ovary on either side. There are two tubes, right and left, each around 10 to 12 centimeters long. Despite their small size, they house a complex interior and perform a sophisticated biological task. We begin at the end nearest the ovary, called the infundibulum. This widened funnel-like portion is edged with finger-like projections called fimbriae. These fimbriae do not physically connect the ovary to the tube, but instead hover nearby, gently sweeping over the ovarian surface. Their purpose is to catch the ovum, the egg cell, once it is released during ovulation. With careful motion, the fimbriae help draw the egg into the tube's opening. From there, the egg enters the ampulla, the widest and longest region of the fallopian tube. It is here, in this softly curved section, that fertilization most often occurs. If sperm are present, they travel up from the uterus, navigating into the fallopian tube. Within the ampulla, sperm and egg may meet, and if the conditions are right, a single sperm may merge with the egg, creating a fertilized zygote. If no fertilization occurs, the egg will continue its journey quietly down the tube, and if fertilization does occur, the newly formed zygote begins a slow division process, preparing for implantation within the uterus. As we move inward from the ampulla, we reach the isthmus. This narrower, more muscular segment of the fallopian tube helps guide the egg or zygote onward. Its gentle contractions, known as peristalsis, coordinate with the wave-like motion of tiny hair-like cells called cilia that line the inner walls of the tube. Cilia beat rhythmically, creating a fluid current that assists movement. Together, peristalsis and cilia ensure that the egg does not simply sit still, but is carried smoothly and steadily toward the uterus. Eventually, the tube narrows further into its final segment, the intramural or interstitial part. This section pierces the wall of the uterus, allowing entry into the uterine cavity. This completes the passage beginning at the ovary and ending within the uterus. Now let's gently review what we explored. The fallopian tubes are divided into four main regions: the infundibulum with its fimbriae, the wide ampulla, where fertilization most often occurs, the narrower isthmus that aids in transport, and the final intramural portion embedded in the uterine wall. Each part plays a precise role, yet all work together harmoniously. Throughout their length, the inner lining of the fallopian tubes is covered in a mucous membrane rich with ciliated and secretory cells. These cells provide nourishment and fluid, supporting both the egg and any potential sperm. The fallopian tube is not passive. It is a responsive environment, one that adapts to hormonal changes and assists in the earliest stages of possible life. The movement of the egg through the tube is neither rushed nor random. It is coordinated, calm, purposeful, a quiet choreography of motion and support. It may take several days for the egg or embryo to travel from the ovary to the uterus. Importantly, this slow progression allows time for the zygote to divide and form a small cluster of cells known as a blastocyst before arriving in the uterine cavity. If implantation is to happen, it will occur only after this quiet, measured journey is complete. Now just pause for a moment. Allow your thoughts to settle gently. Let the image of these slender arched tubes settle in your mind. Imagine their smooth walls, their soft inner lining, the rhythmic motion of the cilia, and the quiet contractions of the smooth muscle guiding movement along. No rush, no urgency, just a continual, natural motion. It's okay if not all the terms are familiar. You're not expected to memorize, just absorb at your own pace. These words will return again, in different ways, throughout the journey ahead. The fallopian tubes remind us that transition can be delicate, that guidance doesn't need to be forceful to be effective, and that even the narrowest passage can carry something essential. As we prepare to move forward, keep this imagery in mind, the soft flow from ovary through the curved and careful fallopian tube and into the welcoming space of the uterus. Next, we'll arrive at the source itself, the ovaries, where the cycle begins again. But for now, simply rest here in this space of gentle understanding. Let the pathways remain calm in your mind, and let the rhythm slow. You start doing just fine. We still continue softly when you set ready. Now we turn our attention inward once again to a pair of small yet deeply significant structures, the ovaries. Each ovary is about the size and shape of an almond, nestled quietly on either side of the uterus. They are suspended in place by delicate ligaments held gently within the pelvic cavity. Despite their size, the ovaries hold tremendous importance. They are the source of both egg cells and the primary female sex hormones. In this way, they serve two roles, reproductive and hormonal. Both are vital. Both are beautifully coordinated. Let's begin with their role in egg release. At birth, the ovaries contain all the egg cells a person will ever have. Each of these is enclosed in a small sac called a follicle. These follicles lie dormant in the ovarian cortex, the outer region of the ovary. In childhood, they remain quiet, resting, waiting. When puberty begins, the body enters a rhythmic cycle, governed by hormonal cues. Each month, a few of these follicles begin to mature, but usually only one will reach full development. This is called the dominant follicle. Within this dominant follicle, the egg, also called an ovum, continues its slow preparation. As the follicle grows, it produces increasing amounts of estrogen, a hormone with powerful effects on the reproductive system. Around the middle of the cycle, the mature follicle responds to a surge of another hormone, luteinizing hormone, or LH. In response, the follicle bursts, releasing the egg into the pelvic cavity. The nearby fimbriae of the fallopian tube gently guide the egg inward, beginning its journey. This release is called ovulation. Now, after the egg is released, the ruptured follicle doesn't simply fade away. Instead, it transforms. It becomes a temporary endocrine structure called the corpus luteum. This yellow body begins to produce a second major hormone, progesterone. Estrogen and progesterone work together in quiet cooperation to prepare the uterus for a potential pregnancy. Estrogen thickens the endometrial lining, encouraging growth. Progesterone stabilizes and supports that lining, creating a warm, nutrient-rich environment for a possible embryo. If no fertilization occurs, the corpus luteum eventually breaks down, hormone levels fall. The uterine lining is shed, and a new cycle begins. This entire process of follicle maturation, egg release, hormone production, and eventual renewal happens in a cyclical rhythm, month after month, year after year, until menopause brings it gradually to a close. Let's pause here for a moment. Let the pattern settle. Each ovary contains many follicles, but in each cycle only one dominant follicle usually completes its journey. After ovulation, the follicle becomes the corpus luteum, which produces progesterone. If pregnancy does not occur, this structure fades, and the next cycle begins. Now that we've walked through the egg's path, let's focus more closely on the hormonal role of the ovaries, because their influence extends far beyond the egg itself. As we've mentioned, the two primary hormones secreted by the ovaries are estrogen and progesterone. These are sometimes called the female sex hormones, though they are present in all humans to varying degrees. Estrogen, produced mainly by developing follicles, has many effects. It stimulates the growth of the uterine lining. It influences the thickness and acidity of cervical mucus. It even has effects outside of reproduction on bones, skin, and mood. Estrogen levels rise gradually during the first half of the menstrual cycle, peaking just before ovulation. Progesterone, produced after ovulation by the corpus luteum, helps maintain the uterine lining. It reduces uterine contractions, supports early pregnancy if it occurs, and signals the body to remain in a more stable, prepared state. Together, these hormones help regulate not just the cycle itself, but the entire reproductive environment. Their levels shift gently across the month, like tides, rising and falling in coordination with ovulation and menstruation. This rhythm is supported by the hypothalamus and pituitary gland in the brain. These structures release hormones such as FSH, follicle-stimulating hormone, and LH, luteinizing hormone. These signals guide the ovaries through each stage of the cycle. In this way, the ovaries are both receivers and senders. They respond to signals from the brain, and they send hormonal messages that affect the rest of the body. Think of the ovaries as quiet timekeepers. Their cycles are not loud or sudden. They are subtle, slow, predictable, though still flexible. Even small variations in stress, health, or environment can influence this rhythm. Let us softly revisit the key ideas. The ovaries house thousands of follicles. Each month, one follicle matures and releases an egg. After ovulation, the follicle becomes the corpus luteum, which produces progesterone. Estrogen is produced mainly by growing follicles and helps prepare the uterus. These hormones influence not only reproduction but many other body systems. The ovarian cycle is part of a larger hormonal conversation between the brain and the reproductive organs. All of this takes place within these small, almond-shaped glands. Steady, essential, undramatic, yet beautifully intricate. The ovary is not just a storehouse of eggs. It is a living, adaptive structure, constantly responding, constantly contributing to the balance of the entire reproductive system. It is okay if the hormone names or steps feel complex. You do not need to remember everything. The goal here is not memorization, but comfort with the pattern, with the flow, with the rhythm. You might imagine the ovaries like metronomes, ticking quietly beneath the surface, signaling the passage of each cycle, maintaining balance through gentle fluctuations. With time, these rhythms become familiar. Now, as we prepare to move on, let's take a final moment to reflect. The ovaries release eggs and hormones. They do so in a cycle that is responsive, regular, and softly intricate. Their influence is felt across the reproductive system and even beyond. They are the starting point, but also the regulators of the body's reproductive timeline. When you're ready, we'll move forward to understand how all these parts come together in one continuous cycle. But for now, rest here, in this space of understanding. Let the words settle. Let the rhythm slow. You're learning, calmly and clearly, and that is enough. Now that we've become familiar with the structures and hormones of the reproductive system, we can begin to see how they work together over time. In this section, we trace the menstrual cycle as a whole, not as something rushed or rigid, but as a flowing pattern, a gentle rhythm unfolding across approximately 28 days. The cycle is often described in four main phases: the menstrual phase, the follicular phase, the ovulatory phase, and the luteal phase. Each one blends softly into the next, and each phase brings subtle shifts in hormones, anatomy, and even mood or energy. Let's walk through them now, slowly, calmly, observing how the body adapts over time. We begin with the menstrual phase. This is day one of the cycle. It starts when pregnancy has not occurred in the previous cycle, and hormone levels, especially estrogen and progesterone, drop. In response, the endometrial lining of the uterus is released. This lining, which had been built up to nourish a potential embryo, is no longer needed. The body lets go. The shedding of this tissue results in menstrual bleeding, commonly called a period. This phase typically lasts between 3 to 7 days, though this varies. While the uterus contracts gently to help expel the lining, the rest of the body may respond too. Some people feel lower energy or physical discomfort during this time. Others feel a sense of reset, of quiet beginning. It's a time of release, and a natural part of the cycle sips renewal. As bleeding tapers off, the body enters the follicular phase. This overlaps slightly with menstruation, beginning around the same time, but continuing for several days after bleeding ends. This phase is named after the follicles in the ovaries. Guided by the brain's release of follicle-stimulating hormone, or FSH, several follicles begin to mature. One of these will become dominant, the one that will eventually release an egg. As this dominant follicle grows, it produces increasing levels of estrogen. Estrogen encourages the endometrial lining to rebuild, thickening and preparing once again. This phase lasts from about day 1 to day 13, though cycles vary from person to person. Emotionally and physically, some may feel a gradual return of energy. The rising estrogen may support mood, skin health, and overall well-being. There's often a sense of building of the body preparing steadily and quietly. Next comes the ovulatory phase. This is a brief but important moment in the cycle. Around day 14, a surge in luteinizing hormone, or LH, triggers the dominant follicle to release its egg. This is ovulation. The egg is released into the pelvic cavity and drawn gently into the nearby fallopian tube. There, it may encounter sperm. If fertilization occurs, the cycle shifts to support early pregnancy. If not, the cycle continues toward renewal. The ovulatory phase is short, usually only a day or two, but it marks the peak of fertility. Estrogen levels are high here, and many people notice subtle changes. Body temperature may rise slightly, cervical mucus may become clearer and more slippery, an aid to sperm movement. Some may feel energized or emotionally open during this time. Others feel little change. It varies. What's important is that this phase is a natural midpoint, when the body is most receptive to conception. After ovulation, the body enters the luteal phase. The empty follicle, now transformed into the corpus luteum, begins producing progesterone. This hormone helps maintain the endometrial lining, stabilizing it in case a fertilized egg needs to implant. Progesterone also reduces uterine contractions and subtly raises body temperature. Its calming influence can be felt throughout the body. Estrogen is still present, but at slightly lower levels than before. The luteal phase lasts about 14 days. During this time, many people experience a slowing down. It can bring steadiness and warmth, or for some, feelings of tension or emotional sensitivity, especially as progesterone begins to fall in the days before menstruation. If no implantation occurs, the corpus luteum gradually fades. Hormone levels drop, and the cycle softly returns to its beginning. Let Dix take a moment to gently revisit the four phases. Menstrual phase, the shedding of the uterine lining, a time of rest and renewal. Follicular phase, follicles grow, estrogen rises, the uterine lining rebuilds. Ovulatory phase. A mature egg is released. Luteal phase. Progesterone supports the uterine lining. The body prepares for potential implantation. Then the cycle begins again. Though often described with exact days, remember, this is a natural rhythm. Some cycles are longer, some shorter, some shift slightly from month to month. Each is valid, each is unique. The hormones involved, FSH, LH, estrogen, and progesterone, rise and fall in waves. Their timing is gentle, coordinated, deeply intelligent. They affect not only the uterus and ovaries, but many systems of the body. Skin, brain, metabolism, and emotions may all respond to these shifts. You don't need to memorize every fluctuation. Instead, let the pattern sink in. Let it become familiar. It may help to think of the cycle as a soft spiral, each turn repeating but never exactly the same. Each phase part of a larger rhythm that continues through much of life. And eventually, with time, these cycles ease into new phases, perimenopause and menopause. But for now, we're simply observing this monthly conversation between the brain, the ovaries, the uterus, and the whole self. It is a conversation without words, a system of signals, a flow of preparation, release, and restoration. As we close this section, know that the menstrual cycle is not a rigid schedule. It is a responsive, adaptive, and deeply integrated rhythm. It is not just about reproduction. It's about connection between body and time. Now that we've followed the arc of the cycle, we can gently shift our focus outward again, toward the final stages of the reproductive journey and how this system changes over time. But before we go there, allow yourself a pause. Let the phases drift through your awareness. No need to hold on tightly. Just know the body moves in cycles, and you are already learning them, slowly, softly, and with ease. Now that we moved through the phases of the menstrual cycle, it's time to step back and view the system from a wider lens. In this section, we connect the reproductive system with the endocrine system, the network of glands and hormones that regulates many of the body's long-term functions. The reproductive cycle doesn't begin in the uterus or ovaries alone. Instead, it is guided from deep within the brain by two small but essential structures, the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. Together, these organs release hormones, chemical messengers that help coordinate timing, development, and communication across the body. Let's explore this gently, one step at a time. We begin with the hypothalamus. This is a small region at the base of the brain. Though tiny in size, it plays a powerful role in maintaining internal balance or homeostasis. Among its many functions, the hypothalamus initiates the hormonal rhythm of the menstrual cycle. It does this by releasing a hormone called gonadotropin-releasing hormone, or GnRH. GnRH is released in pulses, not as a steady stream. These pulses vary in frequency and strength depending on the phase of the cycle. GnRH travels a short distance to its target, the anterior pituitary gland, located just beneath the hypothalamus. In response to GnRH, the anterior pituitary releases two key hormones: follicle-stimulating hormone, or FSH, luteinizing hormone, or LH. These are called gonadotropins because they act on the gonads, in this case the ovaries. FSH and LH are the direct messengers that stimulate ovarian activity. They regulate the growth of follicles, the release of eggs, and the production of estrogen and progesterone. Let's take a moment to understand what each one does. FSH, or follicle-stimulating hormone, plays a prominent role in the follicular phase of the menstrual cycle. It promotes the growth and development of ovarian follicles, tiny sacs, each containing an immature egg. As follicles mature, they begin to release estrogen, especially the one that becomes dominant. Rising estrogen levels signal the pituitary to gradually reduce FSH, ensuring that only one dominant follicle continues to grow. LH, or luteinizing hormone, rises sharply midway through the cycle. This sudden surge of LH is what triggers ovulation, the release of the mature egg from the dominant follicle. After ovulation, LH helps transform the empty follicle into the corpus luteum, which then begins producing progesterone, supporting the second half of the cycle, the luteal phase. Now let's take a moment to gently visualize this hormonal flow. The hypothalamus releases GnRH impulses. In response, the anterior pituitary releases FSH and LH. These travel through the bloodstream to the ovaries. The ovaries then produce estrogen and progesterone depending on the phase of the cycle. These ovarian hormones, in turn, provide feedback to the brain. When estrogen levels rise, they may either stimulate or suppress GnRH depending on the timing. When progesterone increases, it usually signals the brain to slow down stimulation. This is called a feedback loop. It keeps the system in balance. Not too fast, not too slow. Just enough hormone at just the right time. These loops can be positive or negative. A negative feedback loop helps regulate and limit hormone production. For example, high estrogen early in the cycle may slow GnRH and FSH, preventing the development of multiple follicles. A positive feedback loop, though less common, amplifies signals. Just before ovulation, rising estrogen triggers a surge of LH. This is a rare moment of positive feedback, ensuring that the egg is released at the right time. It's a careful coordination of timing, thresholds, and responses. Now, take a moment to reflect on what we just covered. GnRH begins the conversation, pulsing gently from the hypothalamus. It activates the pituitary to release FSH and LH. These guide the ovaries to grow follicles, release eggs, and produce sex hormones. In turn, estrogen and progesterone communicate back, modulating the rhythm. It sips a continuous dialogue, a finely tuned system, not driven by willpower or choice, but by deep internal intelligence. Even when we are resting, the body continues this pattern. Even when we are unaware, hormones move in waves, adjusting, signaling, guiding each phase of the cycle. And while we often speak about this system in terms of reproduction, it's important to know that its influence extends beyond fertility. Estrogen and progesterone affect the brain, the skin, the bones, and the cardiovascular system. Hormonal rhythm influences sleep, appetite, and emotional tone. This system is deeply integrated, woven into nearly every function of the body. As we wind down this section, you don't need to remember every hormone or gland. You don't need to visualize every loop or signal. Just remember the pattern, a rhythm that begins in the brain, moves through the bloodstream, and returns gently again and again. Each part of this system responds to the others, in balance, in cycles, in quiet conversation. Like instruments in an orchestra, each hormone has its cue. It's time to rise, it's time to rest. Now that we've traced the hormonal foundation of the reproductive cycle, we're ready to explore how this system changes over time, from puberty to menopause, and all the stages in between. But before we move forward, take a slow breath. Allow these messengers, these signals, to settle gently in your awareness. You don't need to remember everything. Just know the body has its own rhythm, and you are already learning to hear it. Now we step gently back in time, to a period of quiet transformation, to the time of puberty. This is when the body begins its shift from childhood into reproductive maturity. It does not happen all at once, but unfolds gradually over months and years. Each step guided softly by hormones, each change following an internal rhythm unique to each individual. Let's move slowly through this developmental journey, not to rush, not to judge, but to simply observe and understand. Puberty begins in the brain, specifically in the hypothalamus, the same area we visited earlier. At the onset of puberty, the hypothalamus begins to release GnRH. gonadotropin-releasing hormone at a higher frequency. This change signals the pituitary gland to produce two key hormones, FSH, follicle-stimulating hormone, and LH, luteinizing hormone. These hormones then travel to the ovaries, where they stimulate the production of estrogen and initiate the maturation of follicles. This rise in estrogen marks the beginning of the visible signs of puberty. Let's look at those changes one by one. The first noticeable sign is often the larch, the development of breast tissue. This begins as small, tender bumps beneath the nipples, known as breast buds. Over time, this tissue gradually enlarges, guided by circulating estrogen, forming the structure and shape of the adult breast. Breast development is usually the first outward sign of puberty. It can begin as early as age 8 or as late as 13, and progresses over several years slowly and naturally. There is no single right pace. Each body follows its own quiet timing. Next comes pubarch, the appearance of pubic and underarm hair. This change is influenced by androgens, a group of hormones produced by the adrenal glands and ovaries. Androgens are typically associated with male development, but they also play a vital role in female puberty. Hair begins to appear in the pubic area and later under the arms, first as fine, soft strands, then gradually becoming coarser and darker with time. This too happens gently, layer by layer, following an invisible internal script. Eventually, another key milestone arrives, menarche, the first menstrual period. Menarche usually occurs around 2 to 3 years after breast development begins. It is the first sign that the reproductive system has completed its initial preparations, that ovulation may be beginning to occur. Menarche does not mean full maturity. In fact, early cycles are often anovulatory, meaning that no egg is released at first. The body is still practicing, still fine-tuning the hormonal rhythm. Cycles may be irregular for months or even years, as the system gently learns its pattern. During this time, the uterus, vagina, and external genitalia also mature. The vaginal lining becomes thicker. The uterus increases in size. The cervix begins to change in shape and function. All of this is happening under the surface, softly guided by hormones, gradually preparing the body for its future roles, not just in reproduction, but in broader physical and emotional health. Let's take a moment to gently review these key milestones of puberty: the larch, the development of breast tissue; pubarch, the appearance of pubic and underarm hair; menarche, the first menstrual period. Each of these occurs in response to rising estrogen, androgens, and feedback from the brain. Each one signals that the reproductive system is awakening, slowly, naturally, and without urgency. Beyond the visible changes, puberty also brings shifts in body shape. There is often an increase in hip width, a softening of fat distribution, and growth spurts in height. These physical changes are matched by emotional and cognitive development, also influenced by rising hormones. Mood may fluctuate, sensitivity may increase, awareness of self may deepen. These too are normal parts of the process. Puberty is not just about reproduction. It is a whole body transformation, touching physiology, emotions, and sense of identity. Now that we've gently walked through the landscape of puberty, take a moment to let the sequence settle. Signals from the brain awaken the ovaries. Estrogen begins its quiet influence. Physical signs appear slowly: breasts, hair, menstruation. The inner systems grow more coordinated, more rhythmic. Over time, you don't need to hold every term. You don't need to recall every step. Just let the rhythm of development sink in. Puberty is a natural unfolding, an internal blooming guided by time. In the next section, we still explore what happens as this system continues across the lifespan, from the steadiness of adulthood to the quieting of menopause. But for now, to the rest here. Let the beauty of development wash over you, without pressure, without judgment, just gentle observation and quiet understanding. You are ready to continue when it feels right. Now we return to the adult reproductive system and turn our attention to one of its most delicate processes, fertilization. This is the quiet beginning of conception. It is the moment when one sperm cell from a male successfully meets one egg or ovum from a female. When this union occurs, a new single cell is formed, called a zygote. From that point forward, a new journey begins. Let sex gently walk through this process. From the meeting of two cells to the earliest stage of development, fertilization most often occurs within the fallopian tube, usually in the outer third of the tube, at a region called the ampulla. To arrive there, both egg and sperm must travel. Let sets start with the egg. Each month, during ovulation, one ovary releases a mature egg. This egg is captured by the fimbria, finger-like extensions at the end of the fallopian tube, and gently guided into the tube sep's inner passage. The egg will survive for only about 12 to 24 hours if it is not fertilized. This is a small, sensitive window. It is during this time that the egg waits for a possible meeting with a sperm. Now let cysts follow the sperm. Sperm are deposited in the vaginal canal during ejaculation. From there they begin their journey, swimming upward through the cervix, into the uterus, and finally into the fallopian tubes. This journey is long and challenging, and only a small number of sperm, perhaps a few hundred out of millions, make it to the final destination. Of those that arrive, only one will successfully fertilize the egg. To understand how this happens, let's pause for a moment at the surface of the egg. The egg is surrounded by protective layers. The outermost is called the corona radiata, a soft halo of cells that once nourished the egg during development. Beneath this is the zona pellucida, a thick, clear, shell-like layer. This zone must be penetrated by a sperm for fertilization to occur. As sperm approach the egg, they begin a process called the acrosomal reaction. This is when enzymes in the head of the sperm are released to break down the zona pellucida, clearing a path to the egg sep's surface. It is a focused, precise interaction. And once one sperm successfully enters the egg, a beautiful safeguard is activated. The zona pellucida undergoes a chemical change, blocking all other sperm from entering. This ensures that only one sperm contributes its genetic material. This moment is called syngamy, the true fusion of egg and sperm. Once inside, the sperm releases its nucleus, containing 23 chromosomes. The egg also contains 23 chromosomes. Together they combine to form a complete set of 46 chromosomes. This fusion marks the creation of a new single cell, the zygote. The zygote is not yet an embryo. It is just beginning, the very first cell of what may become a human life. From here, the zygote begins to divide. This process is called cleavage. Roughly 24 to 30 hours after fertilization, the zygote divides into two identical cells, then 4, then 8, and continues doubling in number. These cells are called blastomeres. They remain loosely packed within the zona pellucida. For the first few days, as division continues, the mass of cells becomes a structure called a morula, a solid ball of cells. Eventually, fluid begins to accumulate inside, and the morula transforms into a blastocyst, a hollow structure with an inner group of cells that will become the embryo. While these changes are taking place, the new structure is gently moving, traveling down the fallopian tube toward the uterus. This journey takes about 5 to 7 days. Once the blastocyst reaches the uterus, it prepares for implantation. But implantation does not happen instantly. The blastocyst must first hatch, shedding the zona pellucida. Only then can it attach to the thickened lining of the uterus the endometrium. This stage marks the true beginning of pregnancy. Let him softly recap the steps we've traced. The egg is released during ovulation and enters the fallopian tube. Sperm swim from the vagina, through the cervix and uterus, then to the tube. One sperm penetrates the egg, triggering fertilization. A zygote is formed, a single cell with a full set of chromosomes. This zygote begins to divide, forming a blastocyst. The blastocyst travels to the uterus and prepares for implantation. All of this occurs within the first week after fertilization, a silent, intricate series of steps, each dependent on precise timing and the perfect conditions within the body. It's important to remember. Not every fertilization leads to implantation, and not every implantation leads to a pregnancy. The body has many ways of regulating this process, and each cycle is its own unique rhythm. There is no need to memorize the exact names or timing. Just let the image settle gently, of one sperm, one egg, coming together in quiet fusion to begin something new. In the next section, we still follow the blastocyst as it implants and begins to grow, developing into an embryo and then a fetus. But for now, rest with this knowledge. The beginning of life is not loud. It is calm, ordered, and deeply delicate. Let it ease into your awareness like a soft breath. No pressure, just quiet understanding. You are ready to move forward whenever it feels right. Now that we've gently followed the journey of fertilization and early cell division, we arrive at the next phase, pregnancy. This section guides you slowly through the changes that occur once the fertilized egg. Now a blastocyst reaches the uterus and begins to implant. Pregnancy is not a sudden shift, but a gradual unfolding of changes, physiological, hormonal, and anatomical, all designed to support and protect new life. Let us explore this process together, one quiet step at a time. The first step is implantation. This usually occurs about 6 to 10 days after fertilization. The blastocyst, now free of its outer shell, attaches to the thickened lining of the uterus, the endometrium. The cells of the blastocyst begin to burrow gently into this lining, anchoring themselves securely. Some of these outer cells will become the placenta, an organ that will nourish and support the fetus. The inner cells will begin forming the embryo. Once implantation is complete, the endometrium is no longer just a lining. It is now referred to as the decidua, and it becomes part of the environment that sustains the pregnancy. As implantation takes hold, the body begins to send chemical signals. Hormones start to rise. The most important of these is called human chorionic gonadotropin, or HCG. This hormone is produced by cells of the early placenta, and its presence confirms that implantation has occurred. It is the hormone detected in pregnancy tests. HCG has an important role. It signals the ovary to continue producing progesterone, which keeps the endometrial lining thick, rich, and supportive. This prevents menstruation from occurring and allows pregnancy to continue. Now the uterus begins to change. It is no longer simply a receptive space. It becomes an active participant in gestation. The muscular layer, known as the myometrium, begins to soften and stretch gradually. In early pregnancy, the uterus remains small, about the size of a closed fist. But as weeks pass, it begins to grow, expanding upward and outward to accommodate the developing fetus. By the end of the first trimester, the uterus rises out of the pelvis and begins to fill the lower abdomen. This expansion continues through each trimester, gently shifting nearby organs, making space. Other organs begin to adapt too. The diaphragm moves upward. The stomach and intestines adjust their positions. The bladder is gently compressed as the uterus grows, leading to more frequent urination. Even the skin responds, stretching to allow for expansion, often changing in color and sensitivity due to rising hormone levels. The entire body, quietly and efficiently, reorganizes itself around the task of gestation. Let's return now to the placenta, the vital organ that forms after implantation. The placenta develops from the outer layer of blastocyst cells and grows deep into the uterine wall. It serves as the interface between parent and fetus, facilitating the exchange of oxygen, nutrients, and waste. Blood from the pregnant person flows through spaces in the uterine lining, while fetal blood flows through the umbilical cord. Though these blood supplies do not mix directly, nutrients and gases pass across a thin membrane. The placenta also produces important hormones, such as estrogen, progesterone, and human placental lactogen, each supporting the continuation of pregnancy and preparing the body for birth and breastfeeding. Let's softly pause to reflect on the hormonal shifts. At first, progesterone is maintained by the corpus luteum in the ovary. Later, as the placenta matures, it takes over this role. Progesterone maintains the uterine lining, relaxes the uterine muscles, and helps prevent early contractions. Estrogen supports blood vessel growth, stimulates breast development, and increases uterine sensitivity later in pregnancy. Together, these hormones guide the internal landscape, calmly maintaining the environment necessary for fetal development. Meanwhile, the cardiovascular system adapts as well. Blood volume increases by 30 to 50% during pregnancy. This ensures that both parent and fetus receive enough oxygen and nutrients. The heart rate may increase slightly. The workload on the heart rises, but the body adjusts with remarkable precision. Blood vessels in the uterus expand, making room for greater blood flow, and new vessels form within the placenta to support efficient exchange. Inside the uterus, the fetus is developing steadily. Though still very small in the early weeks, each day brings new growth. At around 8 weeks, the embryo becomes a fetus. By this point, major organs have begun to form. As the months pass, the fetus grows in size and complexity, with fully functioning organ systems, coordinated movements, and eventually the ability to respond to external stimuli. All of this happens within the protected space of the uterus, supported by the placenta, surrounded by amniotic fluid. This fluid cushions the fetus, maintains temperature, and allows for gentle movement and growth. Let's gently recap the core ideas we've covered so far. Implantation marks the beginning of pregnancy. As the blastocyst embeds in the uterine lining, the placenta develops from the outer cells of the blastocyst, providing nourishment and hormonal support. Hormones such as HCG, progesterone, and estrogen guide and sustain the gestational process. The uterus grows and expands over time, making space for the fetus. Other body systems, cardiovascular, respiratory, urinary, all adapt gradually to support the pregnancy. Inside the uterus, the fetus grows month by month, safely enclosed in a fluid-filled sac. These processes are continuous and well-regulated. Each stage supports the next, like gentle waves moving forward, never rushed, never forced. As we bring this section to a quiet close, it's helpful to remember that pregnancy is a spectrum of adaptation, from the smallest shift in hormone levels to the broad expansion of the uterus. Each part of the body contributes to creating and protecting life. These changes are guided not only by anatomy, but by rhythm, by time, and by the natural intelligence of the body. You do not need to remember every detail right now. You can simply let the sequence settle. Let the image of gradual growth and gentle transformation rest in your mind. With each breath, you are absorbing more than you realize. When you're ready, we will move into our final section. where we softly reflect on the reproductive system as a whole. We come to the final chapter of pregnancy, labor and birth. As we near the end of our quiet journey through the reproductive system, this process, though powerful, unfolds gradually in waves, guided by hormones, muscles, and instinct. It marks the transition from gestation to delivery, from internal growth to outward arrival. Let Duttons walk through each step slowly, allowing the rhythm of the body to guide our understanding. Instead, the body sends soft signals. Labor does not begin all at once. Subtle hormonal shifts that prepare the uterus, cervix, and surrounding tissues. Among the most important hormones involved is oxytocin. Oxytocin is produced in the brain by the hypothalamus, but in labor its primary function is to stimulate uterine contractions and released by the posterior pituitary gland. This hormone plays many roles. The uterus begins to contract more rhythmically. These contractions are the muscular waves, as oxytocin levels rise, that help to open the cervix. Working alongside oxytocin are compounds called prostaglandins and move the baby downward. They help soften and thin the cervix. These are lipid-based molecules produced in the uterine tissues and increase the uterus's responsiveness to oxytocin, a process called effacement. Together, these chemical messengers, it sips a conversation between the body and the baby, initiate the complex sequence of labor, subtle, natural, and deeply coordinated. Labor is typically divided into 3 main stages. Let's now follow the physical progression of labor. We shall move through each one gently, step by step. The first stage begins when contractions become regular and progressive. Stage 1. Cervical dilation. These contractions gradually cause the cervix and dilate, or open, the lower opening of the uterus, to efface or thin out, often many hours, especially for first-time pregnancies. The cervix dilates from 0 to 10 centimeters. This opening process happens over time. During this stage, the uterus contracts in intervals, making space for the baby to pass through. The early phase involves gentle, spaced-out contractions. As labor progresses, contractions become stronger, closer together, and longer in duration. This stage ends when full dilation is reached. Stage 2. Delivery of the baby. Once the cervix is fully dilated, the second stage begins. During this phase, the baby moves through the birth canal, a reflex that arises as the baby presses against internal muscles and nerves. The mother may feel the urge to push the pelvic floor muscles, which have supported the uterus throughout pregnancy. Now relax to make way for the baby SIP's descent. The head usually emerges first. This is called a vertex presentation. The baby moves forward, rotating slightly to navigate the pelvic bones, with each contraction and push appearing at the vaginal opening, followed by the shoulders. Eventually, the baby SIP's head crowns. This moment marks the completion of the baby's birth, and then the rest of the body. Stage 3. Delivery of the placenta. These contractions help separate the placenta from the uterine wall. The uterus continues to contract. After the baby is born, is now gently expelled. This stage typically occurs within a few minutes to half an hour after birth. The placenta, which has sustained life throughout pregnancy. This process is part of the body's natural recovery. The uterus then begins to contract down, reducing blood flow and helping prevent excessive bleeding. Let's take a moment to softly reinforce some key concepts. Prostaglandins help soften and prepare the cervix. Oxytocin triggers and strengthens uterine contractions. Labor begins with cervical effacement and dilation. The baby travels through the birth canal during the second stage. The placenta is delivered in the third stage of labor. Each contraction, each shift in hormone levels, flow together in a seamless biological rhythm. These stages, though described in order, that the body instinctively follows is part of a larger pattern. You might wonder what initiates labor in the first place. The precise trigger is not fully understood, but scientists believe it is a combination of maternal and fetal signals. As the fetus matures, its adrenal glands begin producing hormones, signaling that the time for birth is near. These hormones may help stimulate the production of prostaglandins in the uterus, changes in estrogen and progesterone levels. At the same time, prepare the uterus for coordinated contraction. Labor likely begins through a cascade of signals, rather than a single switch, a quiet collaboration between fetus and parent. Oxytocin release is supported by sensory feedback. Throughout labor and birth, the nervous system plays an important role. Pressure in the birth canal, stretching of the cervix, and even touch or emotional connection can enhance oxytocin flow. This creates a feedback loop, where contractions lead to more oxytocin, and oxytocin deepens the contractions. Not only within the body, the entire experience is one of intricate communication, but between body and environment. Take a moment to appreciate the finality of this process as we prepare to gently close this section. But a culmination, labor is not a crisis, a carefully prepared conclusion, to grow and then let go, to months of adaptation. It reflects the body's ability to expand, shift, and release. No matter how labor unfolds, vaginally or surgically, naturally with assistance, you don't need to hold every detail tightly. It remains a physiological expression of readiness and transition. Just let the rhythm settle in. The 3 stages, dilation, delivery, and placental release, form a gentle structure for a profound event. And as with each part of the reproductive system, the body knows what to do. Breathe softly here. Had arrived at the final stretch. It has practiced, prepared, and now completes its cycle. Let the stillness settle. We still move to our closing thoughts, and when you stir ready, where we bring everything together, one last time. And now, as the intensity of labor softens, we enter a new phase, a quieter time of recovery, adjustment, and return. This is the postpartum period. The body, having completed the process of birth, now begins to recalibrate. Organs shift, hormones change, and new physiological patterns emerge. It is not an abrupt transition, but a gentle winding down, a gradual return to balance. Let's begin with the hormonal changes that occur after birth. During pregnancy, hormones such as estrogen and progesterone remain elevated, helping to support the uterus, placenta, and fetus. But once the placenta is delivered, those hormone levels drop quickly. This sudden decline signals the body that gestation has ended, and it creates space for new hormones to rise. Among the most important is prolactin. Prolactin is a hormone released by the anterior pituitary gland. Its primary role is to stimulate milk production in the breasts. In the days following birth, prolactin levels increase, especially in response to nursing. When a baby suckles at the breast, nerves in the nipple send signals to the brain, which in turn stimulates the release of prolactin. This encourages the production of milk within the milk glands. Alongside prolactin, another hormone becomes active, oxytocin. We encountered oxytocin earlier, guiding the uterus through contractions during labor. But after birth, it serves a new function, triggering the letdown reflex. The letdown reflex is a gentle process. It causes milk to be ejected from the milk glands into the ducts, making it available to the nursing infant. This process is often accompanied by a sense of warmth or tingling, a quiet internal signal that milk is flowing. Oxytocin also continues to help the uterus contract, which supports postpartum healing and reduces bleeding. Now let's turn to the uterus itself. After delivery, the uterus begins a process called involution. This means it gradually shrinks back to its pre-pregnancy size. What was once large and expanded now slowly contracts inward. These contractions may be felt as afterpains, especially during breastfeeding, when oxytocin levels rise. By about 6 weeks postpartum, the uterus typically returns to its original size and position. This marks the completion of its recovery phase. The vaginal canal and perineum, which stretch significantly during birth, also begin to heal during this time. Tissues regenerate slowly, and swelling decreases. Any minor tears or incisions, such as an episiotomy, to begin their repair process. Throughout this time, the body is still working, still restoring, still quietly rebalancing. Postpartum physiology also involves changes to the circulatory system. During pregnancy, blood volume increases by nearly 50%. This extra fluid helps supply the growing fetus and prepare for the blood loss of delivery. After birth, the body gradually eliminates this excess. You may recall from earlier that blood vessels and hormone levels shift to accommodate this return. Diuresis, meaning increased urination, is one of the ways the body releases the surplus. This is a normal and healthy part of postpartum adjustment. Another aspect of postpartum physiology is the return of the menstrual cycle. For some individuals, especially those who are breastfeeding frequently, the return of ovulation may be delayed. This is due to the suppressive effect of prolactin on the reproductive hormones ENRH, FSH, and LH. This delay is temporary, and eventually the hormonal rhythms re-establish. Menstruation may resume within a few months, or longer, depending on nursing frequency and individual variation. Emotionally and physically, this time can feel both quiet and complex. Fatigue, hormonal shifts, and physical healing may create a delicate balance that requires patience and rest. There's no need to remember every hormone or every tissue. Just hold the idea that the postpartum body is wise, deeply attuned to its own recovery. Let's take a moment to softly restate the key ideas. After birth, estrogen and progesterone drop. Prolactin rises, promoting milk production. Oxytocin continues to assist with milk ejection and uterine contractions. The uterus undergoes involution, shrinking back to its original form. Fluids are cleared, tissues heal, and hormonal rhythms slowly return. Breastfeeding may delay the return of ovulation. Each of these changes unfolds gently over time. There is no sharp cutoff, no single moment that marks full recovery, just a soft sequence of return. In many ways, the postpartum period is like the final notes of a song, still resonant, still meaningful, but gradually fading into stillness. It is not the end of reproductive capacity, but the close of a specific cycle, a completion of the chapter that began with fertilization and evolved through growth and birth. Let yourself exhale here. The story of reproduction is nearly complete. The body has created, carried, and now returned, steady, balanced, whole. As we move into our final reflections, you don't need to hold on tightly. Let the physiology drift quietly in your awareness, settling like sand into place. Followed the rhythm of the reproductive system, from its start to its recovery. Now we prepare to close the journey with a final chapter, a soft summary to gently bring it all together. And now we arrive at the final chapter in the reproductive timeline, a soft inward turn known as menopause, and the gentle years that surround it. This stage does not come suddenly. It unfolds gradually, over time, through a process called reproductive aging. As we move through this section, there is no need to focus on dates or definitions. Just let your mind follow the quiet rhythm of transition, a slow, natural recalibration of the body's hormonal landscape. Let's begin with the phase known as perimenopause. Perimenopause simply means around menopause. It describes the years leading up to the final menstrual period. For many, this begins sometime in the 40s, though the timing can vary widely. During this stage, the ovaries begin to produce less estrogen and progesterone. These hormones no longer follow the steady monthly cycles that once defined the reproductive years. Instead, their levels begin to fluctuate, sometimes rising, sometimes falling, creating an irregular rhythm that the body learns to respond to over time. As hormone levels shift, the menstrual cycle may begin to change. Periods may become shorter or longer, lighter or heavier, closer together or further apart. Ovulation becomes less consistent. Eventually it stops. The body is transitioning out of its fertile window, not abruptly, but gradually. A gentle winding down. With these changes, some individuals may notice physical or emotional effects. These are part of the body adjusting to new hormonal patterns. They may include hot flashes or changes in temperature regulation, sleep disturbances, mood shifts or changes in concentration, vaginal dryness or shifts in tissue sensitivity, irregular bleeding patterns. These experiences are different for everyone. Some feel them strongly, while others notice very little. In either case, the body is not malfunctioning. It is simply responding to a new rhythm. Eventually, menstruation ceases completely when 12 consecutive months have passed without a period. This marks menopause, the natural end of reproductive cycles. This typically occurs around age 50, though again it varies widely. At this point, the ovaries produce only small amounts of estrogen and progesterone. Ovulation has stopped. The reproductive organs, once cyclical and active, now enter a phase of rest. It's important to pause here, to recognize that this stage is not a failure or a loss. It is a physiological transformation, one that brings the reproductive system to a place of quiet balance. The hormonal patterns are no longer reproductive, but they are still stable. The body finds a new baseline, one that does not cycle monthly, but remains steady over time. Let's gently revisit what's happening at the hormonal level. The decline in ovarian hormones, particularly estrogen, triggers adjustments throughout the body. Estrogen once played many roles, supporting the uterine lining, maintaining vaginal tissue health, regulating bone density, and influencing body temperature. As levels decline, the tissues that relied on estrogen adapt. Some may become thinner, be less elastic, or more sensitive. This includes the vaginal walls, the urinary tract, and the skin. But again, these changes unfold slowly, and the body often compensates over time. The hypothalamus and pituitary gland, which once stimulated the ovaries with FSH and LH, continue to release these hormones, even after the ovaries no longer respond. Because there is no negative feedback from estrogen, FSH and LH levels often rise during and after menopause. This is one of the key physiological markers of the postmenopausal state. Yet the body adjusts to these levels, settling into its new hormonal rhythm, a quieter, but still functional, state of being. Bone density may decline gradually after menopause, as estrogen is no longer present to help maintain it. This is why calcium intake, vitamin D, and weight-bearing movement are often encouraged in this stage of life. The cardiovascular system too may shift, as estrogen once offered some protective effects to heart and vessel tissues, but these changes happen over years. They are not emergencies. They are gentle shifts in internal priorities. Just as puberty marked the beginning of reproductive capacity, menopause marks its natural close. Both are biological transitions, neither better nor worse, just different. And both carry wisdom, if we listen gently. In the postmenopausal phase, The reproductive organs are no longer active, but they are not forgotten. They rest. Still present, still part of the whole. Let's take a soft moment to review what we've explored. Perimenopause is the transition before menopause. Hormones begin to fluctuate, especially estrogen and progesterone. Menopause is marked by 12 months without a period. Ovulation ceases, and the ovaries reduce their hormone production. FSH and LH levels rise as the feedback loop changes. Tissues throughout the body respond to lower estrogen levels gently, and over time, the body adjusts to a new, stable rhythm. This is not an end, but a transformation. A shift from cycles to stillness, from preparation to peace. As we close this section, let yourself exhale into the quiet. The reproductive system, having moved through its seasons, puberty, fertility, pregnancy, and now rest, has completed its arc. What remains is not absence, but presence, a body that continues to grow, adapt, and live fully. This too is physiology. This too is part of the story. In our final section, we will bring everything together, reviewing the journey as a whole, from beginning to end, softly, patiently, and with deep appreciation for the bodycept's rhythm. Now we come to the final part of our journey. Not a quiz, not a summary, but a soft weaving together of all we've explored. A chance to gently reflect and let the rhythm of the female reproductive system settle more deeply into long-term memory. You don't need to remember every structure or every hormone. This is a quiet moment of connection, of seeing the whole, how each part fits into the larger design of the body. Let it begin slowly, by returning to the idea of systems. The body is not made up of isolated parts. It is a collection of interdependent systems, each supporting, responding to, and shaping the others. The female reproductive system, as we've seen, does not work alone. It speaks in the language of hormones, responds to shifts in emotion and energy, adjusts to changes in bone, blood, and brain. Let's move calmly through some of these connections now. First, we revisit the endocrine system. This is the system that coordinates the body through chemical messengers, hormones, from the hypothalamus and pituitary gland to the ovaries. We saw how messages are passed with precision, timed pulses of URH, FSH, and LH, regulating the release of estrogen and progesterone. But those same hormones don't stay confined to the reproductive tract. They move through the bloodstream, reaching the brain, the skin, the bones, and more. Estrogen, for example, influences body temperature, cognition, and memory. It supports vascular health and helps regulate the structure of connective tissues. Progesterone, too, has calming effects, slowing down certain neural circuits, gently supporting sleep and mood. These hormones ripple outward, reminding us that every monthly cycle is not just a local event, but a whole body experience. Now let's sit softly, turn to the nervous system. The brain and reproductive system share constant communication. Mood, attention, and behavior can be subtly shaped by hormonal changes. Many people notice changes in emotional tone across the menstrual cycle, sometimes more energized, other times more introspective. These shifts are not random. They follow patterns aligned with the stages of the follicular, ovulatory, and luteal phases. The nervous system also plays a role during labor, during breastfeeding, and in sexual response, responding to cues, guiding reflexes, and coordinating complex bodily responses with care and precision. So we see, the brain is not separate from reproduction. It is intimately connected, a partner in the entire process. Next, we consider the immune system. At first, it may seem surprising that the immune system plays a role in reproduction, but in fact, it is essential. The uterus, for example, must walk a delicate line, defending the body from infection, while also allowing for the implantation and development of a fertilized egg. To do this, it adapts its immune behavior each cycle, becoming more receptive during the window of implantation, and then adjusting again if pregnancy does not occur. During pregnancy, the immune system must protect both parent and fetus. Without attacking the developing embryo as foreign, it does so through quiet cooperation, altering its response, working in balance with hormones and placental signals. Even during menstruation, the immune system assists, clearing out the shed endometrial lining and supporting the healing of uterine tissues. So we see, again, reproduction is not just hormonal, it is immunological as well. A coordinated effort, subtle and precise. Now let's gently revisit the skeletal system. Estrogen helps maintain healthy bone density. It works by balancing the activity of cells that build and break down bone. Throughout the reproductive years, this hormone keeps bones strong and resilient. But during menopause, as estrogen levels decline, the bones gradually become more porous. This is why weight-bearing exercise, calcium, and vitamin D are often encouraged to support the skeleton in this next stage of life. It's but one more example of how the reproductive system does not work in isolation. It supports the foundation of the body itself. Across all these systems, endocrine, nervous, immune, skeletal, we see one quiet truth. The reproductive system is not separate. It is integrated. Its rhythms are shared. Its signals echoed. Its changes felt across every layer of physiology. This interconnection is not chaotic. It is beautifully synchronized. Each hormone, each structure, each change in temperature, tissue, or tone is part of a larger pattern, one that repeats, adapts, and supports the life of the whole person. Let's take a moment now to softly revisit the journey we've taken together. We began with the external structures, the vulva, the perineum, the visible anatomy that protects and senses. We moved inward to the vagina, the uterus, the fallopian tubes, and the ovaries. We followed the menstrual cycle, watched hormones rise and fall, and observed how the body prepares for fertilization. We explored pregnancy, birth, and postpartum changes, and then the quiet, steady transitions of menopause. At every stage, we saw how this system, so often compartmentalized, was actually a part of the whole, influencing the brain, supporting the bones, shaping mood, responding to immune signals, adapting over time. As we bring this to a close, know that your understanding doesn't need to be perfect. This is not about memorizing every name. It is about letting the pattern settle, the rhythm, the connection, the flow. You can return to this knowledge whenever you like. The pages are still here, quiet and steady, waiting. Let this final moment feel restful. You have taken in a great deal, not forcefully, but gently, softly, through listening, breathing, and allowing the body to remember. The story of the female reproductive system is a story of change, a story of cycles, a story of intelligent, adaptive physiology. It doesn't rush. It doesn't sit demand. It simply continues, the year by year, month by month, moment by moment. And now, so can you. Rest well. Now we come to the final part of our journey. Not a quiz, not a summary, but a soft weaving together of all we've explored. A chance to gently reflect and let the rhythm of the female reproductive system settle more deeply into long-term memory. You don't need to remember every structure or every hormone. This is a quiet moment of connection, of seeing the whole, how each part fits into the larger design of the body. Let's begin slowly, by returning to the idea of systems. The body is not made up of isolated parts. It is a collection of interdependent systems, each supporting, responding to, and shaping the others. The female reproductive system, as we've seen, does not work alone. It speaks in the language of hormones, responds to shifts in emotion and energy, adjusts to changes in bone, blood, and brain. Let's move calmly through some of these connections now. First, we revisit the endocrine system. This is the system that coordinates the body through chemical messengers, hormones. From the hypothalamus and pituitary gland to the ovaries, we saw how messages are passed with precision. Timed pulses of URH, FSH, and LH, regulating the release of estrogen and progesterone. But those same hormones don't stay confined to the reproductive tract. They move through the bloodstream, reaching the brain, the skin, the bones, and more. Estrogen, for example, influences body temperature, cognition, and memory. It supports vascular health and helps regulate the structure of connective tissues. Progesterone, too, has calming effects, slowing down certain neural circuits, gently supporting sleep and mood. These hormones ripple outward, reminding us that every monthly cycle is not just a local event, but a whole body experience. Now let's softly turn to the nervous system. The brain and reproductive system share constant communication. Mood, attention, and behavior can be subtly shaped by hormonal changes. Many people notice changes in emotional tone across the menstrual cycle, sometimes more energized, other times more introspective. These shifts are not random. They follow patterns aligned with the stages of the follicular, ovulatory, and luteal phases. The nervous system also plays a role during labor, during breastfeeding, and in sexual response, responding to cues, guiding reflexes, and coordinating complex bodily responses with care and precision. So we see, the brain is not separate from reproduction. It is intimately connected, a partner in the entire process. Next, we consider the immune system. At first, it may seem surprising that the immune system plays a role in reproduction, but in fact, it is essential. The uterus, for example, must walk a delicate line, defending the body from infection, while also allowing for the implantation and development of a fertilized egg. To do this, it adapts its immune behavior each cycle, becoming more receptive during the window of implantation, and then adjusting again if pregnancy does not occur. During pregnancy, the immune system must protect both parent and fetus. Without attacking the developing embryo as foreign, it does so through quiet cooperation, altering its response, working in balance with hormones and placental signals. Even during menstruation, the immune system assists, clearing out the shed endometrial lining and supporting the healing of uterine tissues. So we see, again, reproduction is not just hormonal, it is immunological as well. The coordinated effort, subtle and precise. Now let's gently revisit the skeletal system. Estrogen helps maintain healthy bone density. It works by balancing the activity of cells that build and break down bone. Throughout the reproductive years, this hormone keeps bones strong and resilient. But during menopause, as estrogen levels decline, the bones gradually become more porous. This is why weight-bearing exercise, calcium, and vitamin D are often encouraged to support the skeleton in this next stage of life. It's but one more example of how the reproductive system does not work in isolation. It supports the foundation of the body itself. Across all these systems, endocrine, nervous, immune, skeletal, we see one quiet truth. The reproductive system is not separate. It is integrated. Its rhythms are shared, its signals echoed. Its changes felt across every layer of physiology. This interconnection is not chaotic. It is beautifully synchronized. Each hormone, each structure, each change in temperature, tissue, or tone is part of a larger pattern, one that repeats, adapts, and supports the life of the whole person. Let's take a moment now to softly revisit the journey we've taken together. We began with the external structures, the vulva, the perineum, the visible anatomy that protects and senses. We moved inward to the vagina, the uterus, the fallopian tubes, and the ovaries. We followed the menstrual cycle, watched hormones rise and fall, and observed how the body prepares for fertilization. We explored pregnancy, birth, and postpartum changes, and then the quiet, steady transitions of menopause. At every stage, we saw how this system, so often compartmentalized, was actually a part of the whole, influencing the brain, supporting the bones, shaping mood, responding to immune signals, adapting over time. As we bring this to a close, know that your understanding doesn't need to be perfect. This is not about memorizing every name. It is about letting the pattern settle, the rhythm, the connection, the flow. You can return to this knowledge whenever you like. The pages are still here, quiet and steady, waiting. Let this final moment feel restful. You have taken in a great deal, not forcefully, but gently, softly, through listening, breathing, and allowing the body to remember. The story of the female reproductive system is a story of change, a story of cycles, a story of intelligent, adaptive physiology. It doesn't rush. It doesn't sit demand. It simply continues, the year by year, month by month, moment by moment. And now, so can you. Rest well. Now we come to the final part of our journey. Not a quiz, not a summary, but a soft weaving together of all we've explored. A chance to gently reflect and let the rhythm of the female reproductive system settle more deeply into long-term memory. You don't need to remember every structure or every hormone. This is a quiet moment of connection, of seeing the whole, how each part fits into the larger design of the body. Let it begin slowly, by returning to the idea of systems. The body is not made up of isolated parts. It is a collection of interdependent systems, each supporting, responding to, and shaping the others. The female reproductive system, as we've seen, does not work alone. It speaks in the language of hormones, responds to shifts in emotion and energy, adjusts to changes in bone, blood, and brain. Let's move calmly through some of these connections now. First, we revisit the endocrine system. This is the system that coordinates the body through chemical messengers, hormones, from the hypothalamus and pituitary gland to the ovaries. We saw how messages are passed with precision, timed pulses of URH, FSH, and LH, regulating the release of estrogen and progesterone. But those same hormones don't stay confined to the reproductive tract. They move through the bloodstream, reaching the brain, the skin, the bones, and more. Estrogen, for example, influences body temperature, cognition, and memory. It supports vascular health and helps regulate the structure of connective tissues. Progesterone, too, has calming effects, slowing down certain neural circuits, gently supporting sleep and mood. These hormones ripple outward, reminding us that every monthly cycle is not just a local event, but a whole body experience. Now let's softly turn to the nervous system. The brain and reproductive system share constant communication. Mood, attention, and behavior can be subtly shaped by hormonal changes. Many people notice changes in emotional tone across the menstrual cycle, sometimes more energized, other times more introspective. These shifts are not random. They follow patterns aligned with the stages of the follicular, ovulatory, and luteal phases. The nervous system also plays a role during labor, during breastfeeding, and in sexual response, responding to cues, guiding reflexes, and coordinating complex bodily responses with care and precision. So we see, the brain is not separate from reproduction. It is intimately connected, a partner in the entire process. Next, we consider the immune system. At first, it may seem surprising that the immune system plays a role in reproduction, but in fact, it is essential. The uterus, for example, must walk a delicate line, defending the body from infection, while also allowing for the implantation and development of a fertilized egg. To do this, it adapts its immune behavior each cycle, becoming more receptive during the window of implantation, and then adjusting again if pregnancy does not occur. During pregnancy, the immune system must protect both parent and fetus. Without attacking the developing embryo as foreign, it does so through quiet cooperation, altering its response, working in balance with hormones and placental signals. Even during menstruation, the immune system assists, clearing out the shed endometrial lining and supporting the healing of uterine tissues. So we see, again, reproduction is not just hormonal, it is immunological as well. The coordinated effort, subtle and precise. Now let's gently revisit the skeletal system. Estrogen helps maintain healthy bone density. It works by balancing the activity of cells that build and break down bone. Throughout the reproductive years, this hormone keeps bones strong and resilient. But during menopause, as estrogen levels decline, the bones gradually become more porous. This is why weight-bearing exercise, calcium, and vitamin D are often encouraged to support the skeleton in this next stage of life. It's but one more example of how the reproductive system does not work in isolation. It supports the foundation of the body itself. Across all these systems, endocrine, nervous, immune, skeletal, we see one quiet truth. The reproductive system is not separate. It is integrated. Its rhythms are shared. Its signals echoed. Its changes felt across every layer of physiology. This interconnection is not chaotic. It is beautifully synchronized. Each hormone, each structure, each change in temperature, tissue, or tone is part of a larger pattern, one that repeats, adapts, and supports the life of the whole person. Let's take a moment now to softly revisit the journey we've taken together. We began with the external structures, the vulva, the perineum, the visible anatomy that protects and senses. We moved inward to the vagina, the uterus, the fallopian tubes, and the ovaries. We followed the menstrual cycle, watched hormones rise and fall, and observed how the body prepares for fertilization. We explored pregnancy, birth, and postpartum changes, and then the quiet, steady transitions of menopause. At every stage, we saw how this system, so often compartmentalized, was actually a part of the whole, influencing the brain, supporting the bones, shaping mood, responding to immune signals, adapting over time. As we bring this to a close, know that your understanding doesn't need to be perfect. This is not about memorizing every name. It is about letting the pattern settle, the rhythm, the connection, the flow. You can return to this knowledge whenever you like. The pages are still here, quiet and steady, waiting. Let this final moment feel restful. You've taken in a great deal, not forcefully, but gently, softly, through listening, breathing, and allowing the body to remember. The story of the female reproductive system is a story of change, a story of cycles, A story of intelligent, adaptive physiology. It doesn't rush. It doesn't sit demand. It simply continues, the year by year, month by month, moment by moment. And now, so can you. Rest well.